Hey everyone, it's the Koopa Man. What the hell happened to villains? Like, I can't turn around while being told that the evil vain sorceress or the homicidal clown man was actually a tortured and misunderstood soul, and that humans are the real monsters. What the hell ever happened to villains who were just evil assholes for the sake of being evil assholes? You may remember in my video about adaptations me mentioning adaptational morality. Over the last few years, we have seen example after example of pieces of media that take once infamous villainous characters from our cultural iconography and subvert them to show them in a, quote, new light where they aren't so bad. Weird how they're doing this.
They told Peter to stay away from the wolf, but he didn't listen to them because he's his own man. And he knew that sometimes the things that seem the most dangerous turn out to be the most fun. Yes, sir, it was a good day for young Peter.
Are you a pedophile?
You know, with the accusations that are coming out around Hollywood, particularly from Corey Feldman, that does seem like the most likely answer to this whole thing. But let's break it down anyway. Some of the earliest examples of this sort of backwards morality adaptationalism comes from, funnily enough, the Gnostics and Cathars. Although I'm sure there were scores of similar such religions and stories beforehand, I mean Zoroastrianism predates Christianity and Gnosticism by a fair bit, none of them really stand out before these groups. Well, who were the Gnostics and Cathars then? During the early days of Christianity, there were 5 major patriarchs of the church. The patriarchs of Rome, Antioch, Jerusalem, Alexandria, and Constantinople. If you were a Christian during this early time, you were a follower of one of these churches, though they were all part of the same larger church. You may also know today of the 5, the Patriarch of Rome is the last one truly standing in the form of Roman Catholicism, being the branch that was founded by St. Peter. It was during these times that a sort of proto-Protestantism was formed in the form of Gnosticism that stood in defiance of all 5 of these churches. What the Gnostics believed generally was that God was evil and the devil and Jesus were servants of a true God. Yeah, basically it was heretical Satanism, though it wasn't outright Satan worship as there was a guy above him.
Thanks, Duke. Well, let me try and give you a clear picture of what we're dealing with here. Here's a photo of the devil, and here's the super devil. Now, as you can see, there are some significant differences. The super devil is at least 6 inches taller. He has a flying motorcycle and a jar of marmalade that we believe forces you to commit adultery.
It was agreed upon that the Gnostics were heretics, but self-evidently were also considered freaks to be ostracized. A little while later, after 3 of the 5 churches collapsed due to the expanding Islamic sphere of influence, and after the Great Schism between the Church of Rome and Constantinople, leading to what we know today as the Catholics and Orthodox, the influences of Gnosticism gained a more firm foothold, as many were at this time trying to make sense of why God has forsaken them to the Muslim horde. This gave rise to the Cathars, or as they call themselves, the good Christians, who justify this as the true God punishing followers of a false God, and that only through Catharism will people be saved. In addition to the Gnostic beliefs of devil good, God evil, the Cathars also refused sacraments from both the Catholic and Orthodox churches, calling them both fake, and would frequently create social unrest whenever possible in efforts to get others to join their movement. They were also vegans and feminists. So yeah, the Cathars were leftists. Their annoyingness and outright refusal of the sacraments, the 10 Commandments, or any and all tenets upheld not only by the Christian churches, but also Judaism and the Muslim horde, made them very unpopular with literally everyone. As such, when it was found out that they were murdering and raping children, kidnapping people, stealing livestock, etc., no one had any problem when the church stopped crusading against the Muslims to retake the Holy Land to get rid of the Cathars. And no, it was not genocide. They sacrificed children. They had it coming. Fuck them. Is all of this a massive oversimplification of what a bunch of dead heretics believed? Probably. But in the general gist of it, it provides the earliest example of reversing moralities and the motivations behind it, which always comes from a place of revisionism, self-superiority, and revolutionary dogma. It isn't even the only early example. Look at the lore of Camelot, for example. You may know the name Morgan Le Fay, a vain, manipulative, evil, vindictive fairy sorceress who was an enemy of Camelot, King Arthur, and Merlin. In some more modern feminist and neo-pagan retellings of the Camelot myth, it's told that Morgana is a character who was wronged by the, quote, patriarchal system of kings and was the rightful ruler of Britain, who was manipulated and wronged by Arthur and Merlin and righteously rebelled against them. This is ignoring the fact that she was a practitioner of satanic black magic and performed rituals using human sacrifice in the blood of children. Maybe that Maleficent movie wasn't so much about Maleficent after all, come to think of it, but could have been seen as a retelling of this story with a more marketable brand for Disney. Still sucks though. Fandoms also have a tendency to do this too, with the tropes of Draco in leather pants and Ron the Death Eater being the names of what it's called when moralities are altered in fan-specific media. These so-called fans have the same kind of motivations as those who purposely do it in official adaptations, but are mostly regarded as an absolute joke until they are given an official certification to do so. And it comes from the same smug place of, I know better than the original author. Sometimes these types of fans create their own so-called improved works because they dislike the moralities and morals of the originals, such as the His Dark Materials saga, which was made to be an atheist answer to the Chronicles of Narnia, a story which has explicit Christian themes, or The Last Ring Bearer, an unofficial sequel to The Lord of the Rings that portrays Sauron as a misunderstood hero. You know, Sauron, follower of Morgoth, creator of the rings, corrupter of the human kings and dwarvish lords, master of the orcs, trolls, and goblins, an enemy of all creation. Yeah, totally a misunderstood figure there. Even more recent examples like the aforementioned Maleficent and Joker are Cruella, a movie where you're supposed to sympathize with a puppy murderer, as well as the Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy cartoon. The latter example is extremely jarring, as while the characters are treated as heroic, their actions show that they are anything but, with them casually murdering or maiming anyone they don't like, or anyone they think wronged them in one way or another. Then there's the DC adaptations on the CW doing the same thing to villains like Killer Frost, Shadow, Slade Wilson, aka Deathstroke the Terminator, to name a few. And some villains, while they are still villainous, get whitewashed and portrayed more sympathetically, like Merlin the Archer or Gorilla Grodd. There's also the X-Men film series, which did this with the character Mystique in its reboot. Granted, Mystique in this series has a much different backstory, being part of Charles Xavier's original X-Men from the start, and thus never really had her Start of Darkness. But knowing who she is in the comic, a sociopathic extremist that even Magneto is wary of, it's rather jarring. They even toned down Deadpool's comedic sociopathy to the point where he's more of a Robin Hood of murderers. So you may be thinking, is it never okay to change a character's morality or make them sympathetic in any way? Well, no. It can be done right. The key is in the execution. Take Batman the Animated Series episode Heart of Ice, which introduced Mr. Freeze. In the comics until this point, Mr. Freeze had been just a crook with an ice gimmick, with not much depth or any reason to sympathize with him beyond that. In Heart of Ice, however, they changed his backstory to be a scientist in the field of cryogenics trying to find a way to cure his terminally ill wife, when his boss wrongs him and tries to shut down the project, which would mean her dying then and there. In the skirmish that ensued, he's doused in chemicals which gave him the condition where he must keep his body at a sub-zero temperature and is desperately seeking revenge. This change went on to define the character from then on, and it can only happen because it was done with respect. Sure, we feel for Freeze, so does Batman, but it doesn't change the fact that he's doing criminal acts and trying to murder someone, whether they deserve it or not. Heart of Ice didn't try to handwave a sympathetic backstory, nor tone down the actions of its villain, Mr. Freeze. The thing about the episode, like most Batman the Animated Series episodes, is that it took its audience as well as the source material very seriously. There's also the Unicron trilogy for Transformers and its interpretation of the Decepticon Starscream. In the original Transformers, Starscream was Megatron's second-in-command, but was infamous for constantly trying to usurp his commander, only to grovel for his forgiveness the second was no longer going his way. In the Unicron trilogy, Starscream is put upon much more by Megatron, to the point that he eventually defects, albeit temporarily, to the Autobots because they treated him with much more respect. He even sacrifices his own life in an attempt to stop the Planet Eater Unicron. This works because while it's a departure from the original character, the story arc work is set up, and it gets explored a lot deeper than what Generation 1 Transformers ever really explored. Unicron Trilogy Starscream earns his redemption, which makes it even more tragic that it doesn't stick. Even in both the movie adaptations of the story How the Grinch Stole Christmas do this to the titular Grinch, and both times it does work, making us sympathize with the lovable Green Grump. Even feel sorry for him in both versions as well. This is a stark contrast from the original book where he's just a jerk for no reason until he realizes, hey, it isn't about the presents, it's about baby Jesus in the end. And of course, nearly every Spider-Man movie ever made makes you feel sorry for the villains in one way or another, which works with the baselines of sympathy that were there in the original comics. In the end, though, is this all a conspiracy to get people to question morality to contribute to the total breakdown and collapse of society? Well, I'm not going to tell you that it isn't, only that you shouldn't assume that it is outright. One must never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained away by stupidity, after all. It's no secret that today's writers and creators are more concerned with masturbating their own egos and pushing their own agendas rather than telling good stories or making good characters. As such, they don't care about the quality of the products they're making, just that they get their ego boost. This has led to a lot of these works of adaptational morality getting botched severely where there are ways it could have been done correctly. It's just that those ways require talent and effort, one of which the current generation of creators lack, and the other they are unwilling to give. Like with any writing trope that gets discussed, there is always a chance that better writers will come along to make works that aren't as bad as the ones we have now. Who knows, maybe someone will do an adaptational morality swap that works instead of insulting the audience's intelligence. Stranger things have happened. Until that day comes, however, this has been the Koopa Man. Game on.